I have learned that when a dog refuses the easiest path, it is sometimes because it remembers something the rest of us forgot. Daniel Carter has crossed the old timber bridge more times than he can count. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, just after sunrise, he and Ranger leave the small log cabin tucked beneath towering ponderosa pines and follow the winding trail that overlooks Blackstone Canyon. The routine has become its own quiet language. Daniel carries a weathered backpack, a metal water bottle, and an old walking stick polished smooth by years of use. Ranger trots a few feet ahead, his black and tan coat glowing beneath the golden morning light, occasionally pausing to watch deer disappear into the trees or hawks circling above the cliffs. They rarely hurry. Neither of them has anywhere more important to be than wherever the trail happens to lead. The crisp mountain air smells of pine needles, damp earth, and distant cedar carried by a gentle breeze drifting through the canyon. Every breath feels clean enough to erase another memory that Daniel has carried since leaving military service years earlier. Ranger had entered his life through a rehabilitation program that paired retired veterans with working dogs needing permanent homes. Nobody could explain where the German Shepherd had spent the earliest years of his life before entering the program. The records simply ended. Daniel never cared. The quiet understanding growing between them had never required paperwork. It had only required patience. This morning feels no different until the bridge appears through the trees. Built decades earlier from thick, weathered beams and reinforced steel supports, the old crossing stretches nearly 100 feet above a narrow, rocky creek flowing between towering sandstone walls. Morning sunlight paints long golden stripes across the wooden planks while tiny patches of mist still hover above the cold water below. Daniel smiles as he steps toward the entrance. Ranger does not follow. Instead, the German Shepherd suddenly stops several yards before the bridge. His ears rise sharply. His body becomes perfectly still. Daniel glances back with a relaxed smile. "Come on, partner," he says softly. Ranger does not move. The dog is not frightened. His tail remains relaxed. His breathing stays calm. Yet something in his amber eyes has changed. He is looking past the bridge rather than at it. Daniel walks back toward him, kneeling beside the faithful dog. He gently scratches behind Ranger's ears before reaching for the leash clipped loosely to the collar. "Everything is all right," he whispers. "We have crossed this bridge 100 times." Ranger slowly steps backward. Only one careful step, then another. He refuses to place even a single paw onto the weathered boards. Daniel studies the bridge more closely. The wooden railings appear solid. The steel cables show no obvious damage. A small inspection sign near the entrance confirms the crossing passed its most recent safety review only weeks earlier. Nothing seems wrong. Yet Ranger remains absolutely certain. The German Shepherd lowers his head slightly, not toward the bridge itself, but toward the rocky creek disappearing beneath it. A faint sound drifts upward through the cool morning air. It is not loud enough to identify. Perhaps moving water striking stone. Perhaps loose gravel shifting somewhere below. Or perhaps something else entirely. Ranger quietly turns his eyes toward Daniel, then looks back into the narrow canyon beneath the bridge. He repeats the movement once more, almost patiently, as though asking a simple question without needing words. Daniel has trusted this dog through storms, wilderness trails, and countless lonely mornings. For reasons he cannot explain, he quietly steps away from the bridge entrance and walks toward the steep footpath leading down into the canyon below. Ranger immediately relaxes, rises without hesitation, and follows beside him. Daniel Carter follows the narrow footpath descending beneath the old bridge with measured, careful steps, while Ranger moves quietly beside him, no longer hesitant now that they have left the weathered wooden crossing behind. The steep trail winds through clusters of juniper, scattered boulders, and patches of tall desert grass still sparkling with morning dew. Above them, the bridge gradually disappears behind thick pine branches until only the faint outline of its steel supports remains visible against the brightening sky. The air becomes noticeably cooler as they approach the creek flowing between smooth sandstone walls carved by countless seasons of rain and snowmelt. Ranger walks with calm confidence, occasionally pausing to glance toward Daniel before continuing downstream. His movements do not resemble random curiosity. They carry the quiet certainty of a guide returning to a familiar place after many years away. Daniel studies every detail surrounding him. The creek is shallow, only a few feet across, with crystal-clear water sliding gently over rounded stones polished smooth by time. Birds sing from the cottonwood trees lining the banks while sunlight filters through the canyon in long golden beams that dance across the moving water. Nothing appears unusual, yet the strange feeling that first settled over him at the bridge continues to grow stronger with every step. Nearly half a mile downstream, Ranger suddenly slows beside a broad gravel bar resting beneath the shadow of the bridge. The German Shepherd stops beside an old cedar stump worn nearly flat by weather. He lowers his nose toward the ground before quietly looking across the creek toward the opposite bank. Daniel follows his gaze. At first he notices nothing except thick brush and towering sandstone cliffs rising overhead. Then a straight line catches his attention. Nature rarely creates perfectly straight lines. He carefully crosses the shallow creek, boots splashing lightly through the cold water, and approaches the opposite bank. Half hidden beneath vines and moss rests a weathered wooden post anchored deeply into the ground. Daniel kneels beside it, brushing away years of accumulated dirt with one gloved hand. Beneath the moss, faded black lettering slowly becomes visible. The words are difficult to read, but one line remains surprisingly clear. Eastern Survey Route. Daniel frowns thoughtfully. He has studied nearly every public trail map covering Blackstone Canyon during the past several years. No route by that name appears anywhere. Ranger quietly joins him, sitting beside the old marker without making a sound. The dog's ears remain forward, his attention fixed farther down the creek where the canyon gradually narrows between towering cliffs. Daniel removes his notebook from the backpack and sketches the location of the forgotten trail marker before taking several photographs with his phone. As he stands, the faint sound that first reached them beneath the bridge returns once again. It drifts softly through the canyon walls, carried by the gentle morning breeze. At first it resembles nothing more than moving air. Then it changes. For only a brief moment, Daniel thinks he hears what sounds almost like distant conversation. The words remain impossible to understand, blending naturally with the flowing creek and whispering wind until they fade completely. Daniel listens carefully. Silence returns. He tells himself the unusual echoes are probably caused by the unique shape of the canyon, where ordinary sounds can travel surprising distances between the towering rock walls. The explanation feels reasonable. Even so, Ranger quietly rises and continues walking toward the narrowing canyon without hesitation, never looking back toward the bridge they left behind. Daniel slips the notebook into his backpack and follows, increasingly convinced that the faithful German Shepherd is not simply exploring another trail. He is leading someone toward a place that has waited patiently for many years to be remembered. The forgotten survey marker lingers in Daniel Carter's thoughts long after he and Ranger leave it behind. Every few yards he glances back toward the weathered post until the dense canyon brush finally hides it from view. The narrow passage ahead grows quieter with each step, as though the towering sandstone walls absorb every unnecessary sound. Even the steady flow of the creek becomes softer, weaving gently between smooth boulders polished by generations of mountain runoff. Ranger continues forward at an even pace, neither rushing nor hesitating. His ears remain alert, occasionally turning toward faint sounds carried through the canyon, while his posture reflects complete confidence. Daniel has learned to recognize the difference between a dog searching randomly and one following something remembered. Today there is no uncertainty in Ranger's movements. The German Shepherd behaves like someone retracing an old path rather than discovering a new one. After another quarter mile, the canyon narrows dramatically. Massive sandstone formations lean inward, allowing only narrow ribbons of morning sunlight to reach the rocky floor below. Moss clings to shaded stone while delicate ferns grow beside small springs emerging naturally from the cliff face. The cool air carries the scent of damp earth mixed with cedar and wild sage. Daniel notices fresh deer tracks crossing the muddy shoreline, along with prints left by raccoons and wild turkeys during the previous night. Then another set of marks catches his attention. They are not recent, but they do not belong to wildlife. Faint impressions of old boot soles remain preserved within a patch of hardened clay protected beneath an overhanging rock ledge. Time has nearly erased them, yet their human origin is unmistakable. Daniel kneels to examine them carefully. The pattern resembles heavy outdoor work boots rather than ordinary hiking shoes. Ranger quietly waits beside him, watching without impatience. Daniel photographs the impressions before continuing deeper into the canyon. Only a few minutes later, Ranger suddenly stops beside an enormous fallen cottonwood resting across the creek. Instead of attempting to climb over the trunk, the German Shepherd turns toward the canyon wall, where thick vines conceal a narrow opening between two towering slabs of sandstone. Daniel gently pushes the vines aside. Behind them lies a surprisingly well-constructed stone stairway carved directly into the rock. Although partially buried beneath leaves and years of natural debris, the carefully shaped steps remain clearly visible. Someone built this passage deliberately many years ago. Daniel slowly ascends several steps before reaching a broad natural shelf overlooking the creek below. The hidden platform contains several unusual features that immediately capture his attention. Rusted steel anchor bolts remain permanently embedded within the sandstone. Fragments of old measuring rods lie tucked beneath loose rocks. A weathered metal bracket protrudes from the cliff where surveying equipment once appears to have been mounted. Everything suggests careful scientific work rather than ordinary hiking. Ranger walks calmly across the stone shelf before stopping near its outer edge. He does not bark. He does not scratch the ground. He simply stands facing one particular section of the cliff while the gentle morning breeze drifts upward from the canyon floor. Once again, that curious sound returns. This time the faint echo lasts slightly longer. Daniel cannot distinguish individual words, yet the rhythm resembles two people holding an ordinary conversation somewhere beyond sight. He slowly turns in every direction searching for another hiking party, but the canyon remains completely empty. The only movement comes from sunlight reflecting across the creek and the quiet German Shepherd standing patiently before the sandstone wall. Daniel steps closer to the place where Ranger has stopped. As he brushes away loose leaves gathered against the base of the cliff, his fingertips strike cold metal hidden beneath decades of dust, and he suddenly realizes the forgotten survey route may have been protecting far more than old trail markers all these years. Daniel Carter carefully brushes away another layer of packed leaves until the hidden piece of metal emerges fully from the sandstone. It is not random debris carried there by floodwater. A heavy stainless steel anchor plate has been permanently bolted into the rock, its surface weathered by decades of changing seasons, but still remarkably solid. For large expansion bolts disappeared deep into the cliff, surrounded by faint markings etched directly into the stone. Daniel gently wipes away the remaining dust with one gloved hand. Small engraved numbers and directional arrows slowly appear beneath the dirt, followed by a nearly invisible inscription reading Acoustic Reference Point 3. He pauses quietly. The words make little sense by themselves, yet they immediately explain why this hidden terrace feels more like a carefully designed observation site than an abandoned hiking trail. Ranger remains motionless beside the anchor plate, watching Daniel with patient confidence before turning his attention toward another section of the cliff several yards away. The German Shepherd does not bark or scratch. He simply waits. Daniel studies the surrounding rock formation more carefully. Additional pieces of forgotten equipment gradually reveal themselves as his eyes adjust to the unusual angles of sunlight entering the narrow canyon. Rusted steel brackets remain secured high above the terrace. Short sections of thick cable disappear into small openings carved into the sandstone. A faded measuring scale has been permanently painted onto one smooth rock face, although years of rain and wind have nearly erased the markings. Everything points toward a long-forgotten engineering or geological survey rather than an ordinary trail. Daniel removes his notebook once again and carefully sketches the layout of the terrace before photographing every visible detail. The quiet canyon seems determined to reveal its story one careful clue at a time. As he finishes, the gentle breeze shifts direction. Once again, the strange echo drifts through the canyon walls. This time the sound lasts several seconds longer than before. It resembles two calm voices exchanging routine observations rather than urgent conversation. Daniel cannot distinguish individual words, yet the rhythm feels oddly familiar, almost like experienced coworkers discussing measurements during an ordinary workday. He slowly walks across the stone platform, listening as the sound grows stronger near one particular corner before fading almost completely only a few feet away. He smiles faintly. Years of hiking have taught him that unusual rock formations can carry sound in remarkable ways. The canyon itself appears to be shaping ordinary echoes into something unexpectedly lifelike. Ranger quietly leaves the anchor plate and follows a narrow ledge curving behind an enormous sandstone pillar. Daniel immediately joins him. Beyond the pillar, hidden from the creek below, lies a small natural alcove protected from wind and rain by an overhanging cliff. The space is barely large enough for two people to stand comfortably, yet someone had clearly spent considerable effort improving it many years earlier. Flat stones have been arranged into a level working surface. Drainage channels carved into the rock guide rainwater away from the interior. Several weathered wooden supports remain tucked against the wall where shelves may once have been attached. Daniel slowly runs his fingertips along the back wall until they encounter another narrow strip of cold metal concealed beneath layers of sandstone dust. Unlike the anchor plate outside, this object feels smooth and rectangular. He carefully clears away the surrounding dirt, revealing the edge of what appears to be a flush-mounted metal access panel built directly into the cliff itself. There is no visible lock, only a recessed pull handle almost completely hidden by time. Ranger quietly sits beside the concealed compartment, his amber eyes resting calmly upon Daniel without the slightest trace of anxiety. The faithful German shepherd does not appear surprised by what they have found. Instead, he seems to have reached exactly the place he intended to bring them from the very moment he refused to step onto the old bridge above. Daniel Carter studies the narrow metal access panel for several long moments before reaching toward the recessed handle. Years of hiking through forgotten corners of public lands have taught him that abandoned equipment deserves patience rather than force. He gently brushes away the remaining layer of sandstone dust until the outline of the compartment becomes completely visible. The panel has been engineered with remarkable precision, fitting almost seamlessly into the surrounding cliff as though the canyon itself had chosen to hide it. Ranger remains seated only a few feet away, watching quietly with relaxed ears and calm breathing. The German shepherd shows no signs of excitement or anxiety. Instead, his expression reflects the quiet confidence of someone arriving exactly where he expected to be. Daniel wraps both hands around the weathered metal handle and pulls carefully. For a brief second, nothing happens. Then the concealed door slowly releases with a soft metallic click that echoes gently through the narrow alcove. The sound is surprisingly smooth, suggesting that whoever built the compartment designed it to resist decades of weather. Cool air escapes from the small chamber hidden inside the sandstone wall. Daniel shines his flashlight into the opening. A neatly organized waterproof storage container rests inside, protected from moisture and sunlight by the natural insulation of the surrounding rock. The heavy container appears untouched despite the passing years. Daniel carefully lifts it from the compartment and places it upon the flat stonework surface nearby. A faded government inventory label remains attached to the lid, although time has erased most of the printed words. Only a few letters remain visible beside an old Forest Service emblem. Ranger quietly steps closer and lowers his nose toward the container without touching it. He inhales once, then slowly raises his head again. Something about the familiar scent seems to settle deep inside him. Daniel notices the change immediately. The German shepherd's eyes soften with quiet recognition rather than curiosity. It is the same gentle expression Daniel has occasionally seen whenever Ranger paused beside forgotten military memorials during their travels. Daniel releases the two stainless steel latches securing the lid. They open with surprising ease. Inside, every item has been carefully wrapped in waterproof protective bags arranged with remarkable precision. Nothing appears scattered or abandoned. The first package contains a thick leather-filled notebook preserved almost perfectly by the dry canyon climate. Beneath it rests a folded topographic survey map covered with handwritten notes, elevation markings, and carefully measured reference points surrounding the bridge and the hidden observation terrace. Another sealed pouch contains two polished Forest Service Ranger identification badges resting side by side beneath transparent plastic. Daniel gently lifts them into the morning light. Although the photographs have faded slightly, the engraved names remain perfectly readable. Benjamin Cole, Nathan Briggs. The names mean nothing to Daniel yet, but he instinctively understands they once belonged to the people who built this. Hidden survey station. Beneath the badges lies a compact digital voice recorder protected inside a padded waterproof case. Beside it rests a small envelope containing several color photographs. Daniel carefully removes the first picture. Two smiling forest rangers stand beside the old bridge many years earlier, while a young German shepherd sits proudly between them. Daniel's breathing becomes noticeably slower as he studies the dog's unmistakable black and tan markings, alert ears, and intelligent amber eyes. He slowly lowers the photograph before turning toward Ranger, who now stands silently beside him beneath the sandstone wall. The resemblance is impossible to ignore. Even after all these years, the familiar expression, distinctive facial markings, and calm posture remain unmistakable. Daniel looks once more from the aging German shepherd to the photograph resting gently in his hands. Without speaking a single word, he realizes this journey beneath the bridge has never been about finding forgotten equipment alone. Somehow, against every reasonable expectation, Ranger has quietly led him back to a chapter of his own life that had begun long before the two of them ever met. Daniel Carter remains motionless inside the hidden stone alcove, the old photograph resting gently in his hands while Ranger quietly sits beside him beneath the weathered sandstone wall. For several long moments, neither of them moves. Only the soft murmur of the creek below and the whisper of wind passing through the narrow canyon disturb the remarkable silence surrounding them. Daniel studies the smiling faces captured in the faded photograph once more. The two Forest Service Rangers appear relaxed beneath the old bridge, standing proudly beside the young German shepherd whose alert eyes and distinctive black and tan markings match Ranger almost perfectly. Time has whitened the fur around his muzzle and softened the sharp edges of youth, yet there can be little doubt. The faithful companion who now shares Daniel's quiet life once belonged to the forgotten story preserved inside this hidden chamber. Daniel carefully returns the photograph to its protective sleeve before lifting the leather-filled notebook from the waterproof container. The aged cover feels surprisingly supple despite the passing years. He slowly opens the first page. Inside, neat handwriting records routine observations about stream levels, weather patterns, wildlife movements, and acoustic measurements taken beneath the bridge. Every entry reflects patience, precision, and genuine respect for the landscape. Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs clearly approach their work not as a job, but as a privilege. Daniel continues turning the pages, while Ranger calmly watches the canyon entrance as though standing quiet guard over memories entrusted to someone new. The notebook gradually becomes more personal. Benjamin occasionally writes about the remarkable intelligence of the young German shepherd assisting the observation team. He praises the dog's extraordinary memory for trails, hidden landmarks, and subtle environmental changes that often escaped human attention. One passage makes Daniel pause. Benjamin writes that Ranger never forgot a location once he connected it with people he trusted. Daniel slowly lowers the notebook and glances toward the aging German shepherd resting peacefully nearby. Suddenly, many small moments from the past several years begin fitting together in ways he never considered before. Ranger's unusual habit of revisiting forgotten trails, his calm attention near historical sites, his quiet certainty whenever old paths crossed places filled with memory. None of it had been random. Daniel gently turns to the final completed page. There, beneath the last dated field entry, appears a short handwritten message separated from the official survey notes. The ink has faded slightly, yet every word remains perfectly readable. If Ranger ever brings someone here, trust where he stops. He remembers the places that matter better than any map we could ever draw. Daniel quietly closes the notebook, feeling the weight of those simple words settle deep within him. He reaches once more into the waterproof container and carefully removes the compact digital voice recorder resting beneath the photographs. Dust lightly covers its protective case, but the controls remain intact. The battery compartment is sealed tightly against moisture, suggesting the recorder may have survived far better than expected. Daniel presses the power button. Nothing happens. He smiles faintly, hardly surprised after so many years. The old battery has almost certainly reached the end of its life. He carefully places the recorder inside his backpack beside the notebook and photographs, determined to examine everything properly once they return to the cabin. Ranger quietly stands and walks toward the narrow opening overlooking the creek, then pauses only long enough to glance back at Daniel. The look carries no urgency now, only quiet reassurance. Daniel gently closes the waterproof container, secures every recovered item, and takes one final look around the hidden observation station before following the faithful German shepherd out into the cool morning sunlight, unaware that the silent recorder waiting inside his backpack still holds the final voices capable of explaining why one remarkable dog refused to let the old bridge erase the promises hidden beneath it. Daniel Carter spends the rest of the afternoon driving back through the mountain roads in thoughtful silence, while Ranger rests comfortably in the passenger seat, occasionally lifting his head to watch the endless pine forests pass beyond the truck window. The recovered notebook, photographs, identification badges, survey map, and digital recorder remain carefully secured inside Daniel's backpack, protected with the same respect he might have shown priceless family heirlooms. The weight of the discoveries feels surprisingly light on his shoulders, yet impossible to ignore in his heart. By the time they reach the cabin, long shadows stretch across the clearing as the golden light of late afternoon filters gently through towering ponderosa pines. Daniel carries everything inside and clears the large wooden table where he normally studies trail maps before every hike. Ranger quietly settles beside the stone fireplace, his calm amber eyes following every movement without a trace of impatience. Daniel carefully removes each recovered item one at a time, arranging them exactly as they had rested inside. The waterproof container. The leather notebook remains open beside the faded photograph of the two smiling Forest Service Rangers and the young German shepherd. Every time Daniel glances toward the picture, the resemblance becomes even more unmistakable. He gently lifts the compact digital voice recorder into his hands once again. Before attempting to power it, he carefully cleans years of fine dust from the battery compartment and the small electrical contacts using a soft cloth from his repair kit. He then searches through an old drawer filled with spare cables, adapters, and batteries collected during years of maintaining hiking equipment and camping electronics. After several careful comparisons, he discovers a compatible external power adapter that fits the recorder perfectly. Daniel connects the cable and waits patiently. For several minutes, nothing happens. Then a tiny charging indicator begins glowing faintly near the corner of the screen. Ranger quietly rises from the fireplace and walks toward the table, stopping beside Daniel with relaxed ears and an expression of quiet attention. Nearly an hour passes before the indicator changes color. Daniel disconnects the cable and presses the power button once more. This time the recorder responds with a soft electronic tone that fills the peaceful cabin. The small display slowly illuminates, revealing one remaining audio file preserved inside its memory. Daniel takes a slow breath before pressing play. Gentle static flows through the speaker for only a few seconds before two calm voices emerge with remarkable clarity. Morning observation log. The first ranger says with an easy laugh carried beneath the distant sound of flowing water. Benjamin Cole reporting from acoustic reference point 3. A second friendly voice immediately follows. Nathan Briggs joining the survey. Ranger reached the bridge before either of us again. At the sound of his own name, the German shepherd quietly lifts his head and looks toward the recorder without making a sound. Daniel watches him carefully. The recording continues with relaxed conversation about weather conditions, stream levels, and unusual sound reflections traveling naturally beneath the old bridge. The two men discuss how ordinary voices can drift through the canyon whenever cool morning air settles between the sandstone walls, creating echoes that many hikers mistakenly believe come from unseen people. Every mystery Daniel experienced beneath the bridge begins finding a simple, believable explanation grounded in science rather than superstition. Before the recording ends, Benjamin's voice grows noticeably quieter. If anyone ever follows Ranger back here, trust where he stops. He remembers every place connected to the people he loves. Nathan chuckles softly before adding one final sentence. The bridge will outlast us. Hopefully kindness will too. The recording ends with nothing more dramatic than the gentle sound of wind moving through pine branches. Silence settles across the cabin once again. Daniel slowly lowers the recorder while Ranger remains quietly beside him. At that moment, Daniel understands that the greatest discovery waiting beneath the old bridge was never hidden inside the stone compartment at all. It had been faithfully protected for years inside the remarkable memory of one loyal German shepherd who simply refused to forget. The following morning, Daniel Carter drives into the small mountain town carrying the carefully packed notebook, photographs, identification badges, survey map, and restored digital recorder inside a protective case resting on the passenger seat beside Ranger. Early sunlight washes across quiet storefronts while local residents begin another ordinary day, unaware that a forgotten chapter of their community's history has quietly returned. Daniel parks beside the modest historical museum housed inside a century-old stone building overlooking the town square. Ranger steps calmly from the truck and walks beside him through the front entrance, drawing warm smiles from volunteers arranging displays for the morning visitors. Behind the reception desk stands Harold Bennett, an elderly museum curator whose lifelong fascination with regional history has preserved countless stories that might otherwise have disappeared. Daniel introduces himself before carefully placing the waterproof container upon a large wooden archive table. Harold notices the faded Forest Service emblem immediately. His expression changes from polite curiosity to genuine concentration. Together, they begin examining every recovered item beneath bright archival lights. Harold carefully unfolds the topographic survey map, comparing its handwritten markings with several official trail maps stored inside flat, filing drawers nearby. His eyebrows slowly rise. None of the forgotten observation points appear on any modern edition. The hidden survey route beneath the bridge vanished from public records many years earlier. When Daniel shows him the restored photographs, Harold quietly removes his reading glasses and studies the faces for several long moments. Finally, he opens a cabinet containing archived Ranger records dating back decades. After searching through carefully labeled folders, he gently places two black and white personnel photographs beside the recovered color image. The names match perfectly. Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs once served as respected Forest Service Rangers assigned to environmental research throughout Blackstone Canyon. Harold quietly shakes his head with amazement. Most people remember their names, he says softly. Very few remember what they were actually working on. Daniel then places the restored digital recorder upon the table. Harold listens quietly as Benjamin and Nathan's calm voices once again fill the archive room with observations about stream levels, canyon acoustics, and Ranger's remarkable memory. No one interrupts the recording. Even the museum volunteers stop what they are doing to listen respectfully. When the final sentence fades into silence, Harold slowly closes his eyes for a brief moment before smiling with quiet gratitude. That explains everything, he whispers. He walks toward another cabinet and removes a thin research file covered with years of dust. Inside are engineering proposals, geological notes, and correspondence describing an experimental acoustic mapping project beneath the old bridge. Budget changes eventually ended the research before the final reports were published. The observation stations remained abandoned. Over time, maps were revised, equipment removed, and institutional memory quietly faded. Nothing had been deliberately hidden. It had simply been forgotten. Daniel looks toward Ranger lying peacefully beside the archive table. The faithful German shepherd appears completely relaxed, resting his head upon his front paws as though the burden he had carried for so many years has finally begun to lift. Harold gently closes the recovered notebook before placing one hand upon the waterproof container. These belong to our history, he says quietly. But today they also belong to your story because your friend refused to let them disappear forever. Daniel smiles softly while Ranger slowly opens his amber eyes. For the first time since the strange morning beneath the bridge, Daniel no longer feels that he is chasing an unanswered mystery. Instead, he realizes he has become part of something much simpler and far more meaningful, helping quiet acts of dedication, friendship, and loyalty find their rightful place in memory before time could erase them forever. Several days pass before Daniel Carter receives a telephone call from Harold Bennett at the museum. The elderly curator sounds more excited than Daniel has heard him before. During the past week, he has worked closely with regional Forest Service historians and archival specialists, comparing the recovered notebook, survey map, photographs, and voice recording with official records preserved in state archives. Together, they have reconstructed an almost complete timeline of the forgotten environmental research project beneath the old bridge. Daniel and Ranger return to the museum the following morning, where several carefully organized folders now cover the large archive table. Sunlight pours through tall windows, illuminating yellowed engineering drawings, handwritten correspondence, and aerial photographs taken decades earlier. Harold gently unfolds a restored blueprint showing the bridge exactly as it appeared during its construction. Small handwritten notes identify the hidden observation terrace, the acoustic reference points, and the concealed storage compartment Daniel discovered beneath the sandstone wall. Nothing about the project had been classified or intentionally concealed. The survey simply ended before its findings could be fully published. Over time, new infrastructure projects, changing personnel, and updated trail systems gradually pushed the work into forgotten filing cabinets. Harold smiles quietly as he places the recovered notebook beside the official documents. Every measurement recorded by Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs matches the archived engineering reports with remarkable precision. The restored digital recording provides the missing explanation that historians had searched for without success. The unusual echoes heard beneath the bridge resulted from the canyon's natural acoustic design, where temperature changes and curved sandstone walls carried ordinary conversation across surprising distances. Local legends eventually transformed those harmless echoes into mysterious stories because the scientific explanation had quietly disappeared from memory. Daniel listens with calm satisfaction. He never hoped to solve an unsolved mystery. He simply trusted one faithful dog. Ranger rests peacefully beside the archive table while museum volunteers gently greet him throughout the morning. Several older residents recognize the photographs displayed on the table. One retired ranger remembers hearing Benjamin Cole speak at a community meeting many years earlier. Another recalls seeing a young German shepherd accompanying survey teams along the canyon trails every week. Each conversation adds another small piece to the larger picture until forgotten memories begin connecting naturally with the recovered evidence. By late afternoon, representatives from the Forest Service arrive, carrying protective archival cases designed for long-term preservation. Every recovered item is carefully photographed, cataloged, and documented according to professional conservation standards before being returned to secure museum storage under a shared preservation agreement. Daniel signs the final paperwork with quiet gratitude, relieved that the notebook and recordings will remain available for future generations rather than disappearing once again inside forgotten boxes. Before leaving, Harold presents Daniel with professionally restored copies of every photograph, scanned notebook page, and audio recording, ensuring that the remarkable journey will always remain part of his own life as well. Ranger slowly stands as Daniel gathers the carefully prepared copies into his backpack. The faithful German shepherd pauses beside the display table one final time, looking calmly toward the smiling faces of Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs preserved forever inside the restored photograph. No one speaks for several quiet seconds. Words seem unnecessary. As Daniel and Ranger step outside into the warm afternoon sunlight, the old bridge no longer feels like an isolated landmark hidden inside Blackstone Canyon. Through patience, careful research, and one extraordinary dog's unwavering memory, it has quietly become a place where history, friendship, and simple acts of kindness finally found their way home. During the weeks that follow, quiet changes begin spreading far beyond the museum walls. The Forest Service reviews the recovered documents with careful attention, comparing the restored survey records against modern maps and maintenance reports for Blackstone Canyon. Engineers visit the old bridge carrying measuring equipment remarkably similar to the instruments shown in Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs's photographs. Rather than replacing history, they choose to preserve it. The hidden observation terrace remains protected, while the forgotten survey route is officially documented once again as a historical research site instead of an abandoned trail. Daniel Carter watches these developments from a respectful distance. He never seeks interviews or public recognition. Whenever local newspapers ask how the discoveries were made, he simply smiles and points toward Ranger resting quietly beside him. The faithful German shepherd accepts every kind pat on the head with calm dignity, never behaving as though he understands the attention surrounding him. Yet Daniel suspects otherwise. Each time they return to the canyon, Ranger's steady pace and peaceful expression suggest that some invisible weight has finally been lifted. 1. Bright Saturday morning, Harold Bennett invites Daniel to attend a small gathering near the bridge. There are no large crowds, no elaborate ceremonies, and no television cameras waiting beside the trail. Only a handful of Forest Service employees, museum volunteers, local families, and several retired rangers stand together beneath tall ponderosa pines, while sunlight filters gently across the weathered wooden planks above the creek. A simple informational marker has been installed near the entrance to the bridge. Crafted from natural stone and bronze, it explains the environmental research once conducted beneath the canyon, recognizes Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs for their dedication, and briefly describes how the lost records were recovered through the remarkable memory of a loyal German shepherd and the trust of the veteran who chose to follow him. Daniel quietly reads every word before stepping aside for others. He notices children stopping to study the photographs displayed beside the plaque. Older visitors smile as they share stories about hiking the canyon decades earlier. Young rangers discuss how careful record-keeping protects both nature and history for future generations. The bridge itself has not changed. The same weathered beams stretch across the canyon. The same creek flows patiently beneath its shadow. Yet the place somehow feels different now, not because anything new has been added, but because something valuable has finally been remembered. After the gathering ends, most visitors return toward the parking area. Daniel and Ranger remain behind. They walk slowly down the familiar footpath leading beneath the bridge one more time. The forgotten survey marker still stands quietly beside the creek. The hidden stone stairway remains sheltered behind thick vines. The observation terrace rests peacefully beneath the towering sandstone wall exactly as they first discovered it. Daniel sits upon the flat stone where he once opened the waterproof container. Ranger settles comfortably beside him, looking across the canyon while a cool breeze carries the gentle sound of flowing water through the narrow cliffs. Once again, faint echoes drift naturally between the sandstone walls. They sound like distant conversation, just as Benjamin and Nathan explained in their final recording. This time Daniel smiles instead of wondering. Science has answered the mystery, yet the feeling remains no less beautiful. Some places deserve to be understood. Others deserve simply to be appreciated. As afternoon sunlight slowly reaches the hidden terrace, Daniel realizes that history is not always preserved by official records or carefully labeled archives. Sometimes it survives because one faithful companion quietly remembers the path long after everyone else has forgotten where it begins. Autumn arrives quietly in Blackstone Canyon, painting the cottonwood trees with brilliant shades of gold, while cool morning air carries the familiar scent of pine, cedar, and fresh mountain water through the winding trails. Daniel Carter and Ranger continue their weekly walks, but the journey no longer feels like a search for forgotten answers. Instead, it has become a peaceful tradition of gratitude. One crisp morning, Daniel receives another invitation from Harold Bennett asking if he can stop by the museum before heading to the canyon. Curious, Daniel arrives with Ranger walking calmly beside him. Inside the archive room, several framed photographs now rest upon a long wooden table beside newly restored historical records. Harold greets them with a warm smile before introducing two visitors who have traveled several hours after learning about the recovered survey materials. Margaret Cole, the daughter of Benjamin Cole, and Thomas Briggs, the nephew of Nathan Briggs, quietly step forward carrying a worn family photo album that has remained tucked away inside a cedar chest for decades. Neither family had known exactly what became of the research project beneath the bridge after their relatives retired. Many stories had faded over time, leaving only scattered memories shared during family gatherings. Daniel carefully places the restored photograph recovered from the hidden compartment beside the pictures inside the old album. The similarities are unmistakable. Different days, different moments, the same smiling faces, and always the same loyal, young German shepherd standing proudly beside the two forest rangers. Margaret gently wipes away tears before kneeling beside Ranger. She studies his kind amber eyes and the familiar markings across his face with quiet amazement. "My father used to say this dog remembered trails better than maps," she whispers softly. Ranger calmly leans forward, allowing her to stroke the side of his neck without hesitation. There is no dramatic reaction, no sudden recognition that belongs only in fiction. Instead, there is something far more believable and deeply moving. An old dog offering quiet trust to someone connected with a life he once knew long ago. Thomas carefully opens the family album to a faded handwritten note tucked between its pages. Benjamin had written that Ranger possessed an extraordinary gift for leading people back to places worth protecting, even when everyone else believed those places had been forgotten forever. Harold smiles gently as the families compare stories, photographs, and journal entries throughout the morning. Piece by piece, separate memories begin forming one complete history that none of them could have assembled alone. Before leaving, Margaret presents Daniel with a carefully copied photograph from her family collection. It shows Benjamin and Nathan sitting beneath the very same bridge during a lunch break, while the young German shepherd sleeps peacefully at their feet beneath the afternoon sun. Daniel accepts the gift with sincere gratitude, promising it will remain displayed inside his cabin, where it can continue reminding him that quiet acts of service often leave the deepest marks upon the world. As everyone steps outside, Ranger pauses beside the museum entrance and looks toward the distant mountains rising beyond the town. Daniel gently rests one hand upon the faithful German shepherd's shoulder before they begin walking back toward the truck together. For the first time since that unusual morning at the bridge, Daniel realizes this remarkable journey has accomplished something even greater than recovering forgotten history. It has quietly reunited memories that have been scattered across time, allowing strangers, families, and one loyal companion to complete a story that had patiently waited for every missing piece to find its way home. Several weeks later, the first light snowfall of the season settles across Blackstone Canyon, covering the trail with a thin white blanket that sparkles beneath the pale winter sun. Daniel Carter tightens his jacket against the crisp morning air, while Ranger walks beside him with the same calm confidence that has guided every step of their remarkable journey. The familiar path winds quietly through towering pines whose branches bow beneath fresh snow, and every sound seems softened by the peaceful stillness surrounding the canyon. They eventually arrive at the old bridge where everything first changed. Daniel pauses near the new historical marker, reading its carefully engraved words one more time before resting a gloved hand against the cool bronze surface. Visitors have already left small tokens of appreciation beside the stone. A pine cone arranged by a child. A handwritten thank you card protected inside a weatherproof sleeve. A tiny wooden carving of a German shepherd placed respectfully beside the plaque. None of them are expensive. Every one of them carries quiet sincerity. Daniel smiles before turning toward Ranger. The faithful German shepherd stands at the entrance to the bridge exactly where he once refused to take another step. For a long moment, he simply watches the weathered wooden planks stretching across the narrow canyon, while the gentle sound of the creek rises from below. Daniel says nothing. He has learned that not every meaningful moment requires words. A cool breeze drifts through the pines, carrying the familiar echo of moving water between the sandstone cliffs. It sounds exactly as Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs once described on the restored recording. Nothing mysterious, nothing supernatural. Only nature performing its quiet work with remarkable beauty. Ranger slowly lowers his head, takes one careful breath, and then places a single paw onto the first wooden plank. Daniel watches silently. Another step follows. Then another. Without hesitation or fear, the aging German shepherd calmly walks across the bridge for the first time. Since leading Daniel toward the forgotten survey station hidden beneath the canyon wall, his pace remains relaxed from beginning to end. He never stops to look below. He never turns back toward the hidden trail. When he reaches the opposite side, he pauses only long enough to glance over his shoulder at Daniel with the same peaceful expression that first convinced the veteran to trust him. Daniel quietly follows across the bridge, every footstep echoing softly against weathered timber warmed by the weak winter sunlight. Standing beside Ranger on the opposite side, he gently kneels and places one hand upon the dog's shoulder. There is no dramatic celebration, no applause waiting beyond the bridge. Only two companions sharing a quiet understanding that something invisible has finally been completed. They continue walking along the snow-covered trail together while the canyon slowly disappears behind the towering pines. High above them, a bald eagle circles gracefully through the clear blue sky before drifting toward distant mountain ridges. The old bridge remains exactly where it has always stood, connecting one side of the canyon to the other. Yet for Daniel it now represents something much greater than wood, steel, and stone. It has become proof that loyalty can preserve history, patience can uncover forgotten truths, and one faithful companion can carry a promise safely through the passing years until the right person finally arrives to understand why it was never forgotten. Spring quietly returns to Blackstone Canyon 1 year later, bringing fresh green leaves to the cottonwood trees and filling the clear mountain air with the scent of wildflowers, pine, and clean flowing water. Daniel Carter and Ranger leave the cabin before sunrise just as they have done countless times before, following the familiar trail beneath a sky slowly turning from deep blue to soft gold. Their steps are slower now, not because either of them has lost the desire to explore, but because neither feels the need to hurry anymore. Every bend in the trail carries a memory that no longer feels heavy. Every familiar landmark has become a quiet reminder that some of the greatest discoveries arrive only after someone chooses to trust what cannot yet be explained. As they approach the old bridge, morning light spills gently across the weathered wooden planks while the creek below continues its endless journey through the sandstone canyon. Birds greet the new day from the tops of towering pines, and the same gentle echoes drift naturally beneath the bridge exactly as Benjamin Cole and Nathan Briggs once described in their carefully preserved recordings. Daniel pauses for only a moment beside the historical marker before continuing forward. Ranger walks calmly beside him without hesitation, crossing the bridge as naturally as any other stretch of trail. There is no longer a reason to stop. The promise he carried so faithfully has already been fulfilled. On the opposite side, Daniel follows a small side trail leading to a rocky overlook where the entire canyon opens beneath the morning sky. He removes the carefully restored photograph from his backpack, the one showing Benjamin, Nathan, and the young German shepherd resting together beneath the bridge many years earlier. The edges have been protected inside a clear archival sleeve, but the smiles remain as warm as the day the picture was taken. Daniel places the photograph beside a smooth stone and quietly looks across the canyon while Ranger settles comfortably at his side. The peaceful silence needs no conversation. The photograph eventually returns to Daniel's backpack, not because it belongs hidden away, but because it has become part of the life that continues ahead rather than a memory trapped behind them. As they begin walking home, they pass several young hikers studying the historical marker before starting across the bridge. One child notices Ranger and smiles brightly. "That is the famous dog," he says with genuine excitement. Daniel simply smiles back without correcting him. Ranger gently wags his tail before continuing down the trail. Fame has never mattered. Kindness always has. Far behind them, the bridge remains unchanged, carrying hikers from one side of the canyon to the other just as it has for generations. Beneath it, the hidden observation terrace rests peacefully inside the sandstone walls, preserved not as a forgotten secret, but as a carefully remembered chapter of local history. The notebook, photographs, recordings, and survey maps now rest safely inside the museum where future visitors can discover them for themselves. Yet Daniel understands that the most valuable part of the story was never placed inside a display case. It walked beside him on 4 steady legs, asking for nothing except trust. Long after names fade from memory and weather softens the edges of stone and wood, simple acts of loyalty continue traveling quietly from one life to another. Sometimes the strongest bridge is not the one built from timber and steel. Sometimes it is built from patience, compassion, and the silent promise of a faithful heart that refuses to forget where love once lived.